Yeah, of course. With Molecule, we're building a platform and marketplace for development and trading of pharmaceutical IP. So we are essentially, our goal is to like distribute the costs, risks, and ownership in how drug development works today, and essentially on the one side, make drug development more like open source software. So creating incentives for people to release information out into the public, and for the development of new therapeutics through that way to become much more democratic and collaboration driven. So like uniting different stakeholders, individuals, researchers, around how a drug can be brought to market. Really ultimately bringing down the costs and the long time to market that you have in pharma today. And a lot of those high costs and long time to market can be drawn back to how monopolized drug development is today. So today it's really like one company that does all the work, and then creates a monopoly on that work. But a lot of therapeutics fail because of that. So having an approach where actually the market drives the compound forward is like much more efficient. Yeah, it's actually very simple. So you have tens of thousands or like hundreds of thousands of potential therapeutics or molecules that could be used to treat potential disease or a potential group of diseases. So you have a lot of different compounds. And today, each company does all of the work themselves to identify the right ones, to patent them, and then to bring them to market in a really long cycle. So what we say is, why not, instead of having each company do their own pipeline, we just create a market. And then the market curates the best treatments to be advanced and go to market. So it's a very simple approach if you think about it. There's a lot of potential treatments, but all the companies are doing their own work at the moment. So if you put them on a platform or have market participants curate the most valuable IP, the market could be much more efficient. Oh yeah. So on the one side, ideally it's much simpler access to capital than you have today. So essentially now researchers can commercialize or can commercialize the IP or their inventions without having to create companies around them. So it's an alternative financing model for researchers. It's a much more democratic and transparent financing model than the current like VC funding or grant funding, which both of them take very long. And then on the other side, it's also just a different collaboration and development model. So instead of doing all the work myself, I can now collaborate with other researchers. I can easily give other researchers shares in the IP that I'm developing. And through that, really bring down my costs and accelerate the time to market. Yeah, so the current disease areas that we're working with are in rare and neglected diseases, so specifically in malaria, where there's strong open source research communities around those drugs. Then in biogerontology or longevity research, which is developing molecules to like slow down aging in the human body. And then the last one is in psychedelic research. So yes, but probably not in the alpha that we have. The primary reason around it, so I think there's two value propositions with Aragon Fundraising. One is like having a DAO, and the other is fundraising for the DAO. For the alpha that we're doing at the moment with specific research projects, we only need fundraising. So a DAO would overcomplicate the user experience for the researchers, because the researchers are like, I'm doing this scientific project. I need to raise $100,000 to do the project. I will open source all the results here, and maybe you guys get to share the results, like the upside from the results. But there's no governance structure that you would need from the let's say the contributors. There's no like a vote that needs to be put. Should we use the money for this or should we use it for that? It's like very clear. I have this project, and I'm spending the money on this equipment and this equipment and this equipment. And so in the alpha, that overcomplicates things. but we're very keen to experiment it much more, not in our alpha, but in like our next version. Which our next version will then be like, so it really depends on the use case that you have in specific for specific IP. So, for example, one of the malaria projects that we're working with, there is an opportunity to fully open source the IP, so you can put it into the commons, and then you need to decide how do we continue to develop this, how do we fundraise it, and then it's kind of this more open source consortium of different people working together, which is a different case than like I am a researcher, I am doing this project. So there it's like we're a group of people, we have a common goal, and we need some funding for it. So for those use cases, we're much more looking at using it. And then probably running like an early experiment or like an early trial with one of those groups to see whether the system works well. We're very excited to about the modularity of Aragon Fundraising and how well it can plug in. I think something that I guess I'd still like to see though is that, and I think this is, I don't know what the current thinking is on this, but we don't need a lot of the features or user interfaces that come with Aragon as a whole. And so we're like, we can't give this to like someone who is in pharma and drug development. They only care about very specific things. They don't care about having all of these other features. So presenting them the whole thing I think will confuse them. So I think there's but on the other side, all of those features are amazing and they're very useful depending on what you're trying to do. But that's something that we kind of went through, just more thinking from like a user interface and like showing this to like people that are not in crypto, and maybe that don't even care about decentralization that much. Like maybe it doesn't all have to be decentralized for them. They just want something that works versus something that is like, fully like liquid democracy. We're working with a lot of universities. We've signed letter of intents already with several of them, like partnership agreements. Research labs, smaller biotech companies. We're also starting to work with larger pharma companies that are trying to understand which part they can play in an ecosystem like this. We're also working with a lot of companies that are using AI for drug discovery. So they use AI to discover new compounds, and then they can put them onto our system in bulk. Then obviously also with institutional investors that would be looking to invest into the compounds on the other side. We're trying to work with regulators as well. It works very similar to, I think, some of the work that you guys have done, which is also really interesting for us then in that sense, from a scalability perspective. It's a similar model. It's like a Delaware LLC. And then you move the IP into that special purpose vehicle. And then that special purpose vehicle, the ownership of that almost gets like ledgered onto the NFT. So it's the most common model that we've looked at is with a Delaware company, where you move the IP into that Delaware company. Now that Delaware company doesn't own anything else but that IP.